Welcome to Unpacking Peanuts, the podcast where three cartoonists take an in-depth look at the greatest comic strip of all time, Peanuts by Charles M. Schulz.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. My name's Jimmy Gownley, and I'm a cartoonist, and you can find all my new work, including this year, New Amelia Rules, over on Gville Comics on Substack. And joining me as always are my pals, co-hosts, and fellow cartoonists. He's a playwright and a composer, both of the band Complicated People, as well as for this very podcast. He's the co-creator of the original comic book price guide, the original editor for Amelia Rules, and the creator of such great strips as Strange Attractors, A Gathering of Spells, and Tangled River. It's Michael Cohen.
Say hey.
And he's the executive producer and writer of Mystery Science Theater 3000, a former vice president of Archie Comics, and the creator of the Instagram sensation Sweetest Beasts. It's Harold Buckholtz.
Hello.
And keeping it running smooth and keeping us out of trouble, it's our producer and editor, Liz Sumner.
Howdy.
Guys, we're going to be doing a special all weird episode because there's lots of things you can
something new and different.
Weird used to be a seasoning, but this time it's the meal. We're just having a whole podcast of weird, and we couldn't be more excited about it. Do you guys? What do you think about the strips you've picked? What we've done is we've each picked three strips that we talked about in the past on this show. We're gonna use the old time machine to clue you into what we thought about it at the time. So, guys, what was your criteria when you were picking your weird strips?
Well, I didn't ponder it too much, and I didn't do any research. There were
Good.
two real obvious ones.
And Jimmy stole one of your ideas.
Yeah, but these
these
ran as a series, so it was more than one strip. The third one, I probably could have given it more thought, but I did come across an really unusual reference in a Schroeder strip, which I think it's the only time this happened in Peanuts, even though it's kind of a trope in a lot of comics. Yeah, he refers to being in a comic strip.
That's right. Yep.
And it's not weird a lot of comics do that all the time, but it's weird for Peanuts to do it once.
Yeah, just once. Yeah.
Yeah.
Harold, what about you?
I just went in and searched. Liz has been making transcripts of this, which is kind of cool that there's like a searchable text for these. So through that, I was like, when did we say something was weird? Jog the memory, and sure enough, there were some really cool ones in here. So that was my criteria. And then from that, I picked the ones that I'd wanted to talk about, or at least bring back out into the world because they were fun conversations.
And what qualifies as weird in a comic strip with a dog that sits on top of the doghouse and writes novels? But that, because obviously that didn't qualify as weird.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this a lot in these sequences. Where weird is unacceptable, weird is really cool. We have lots of different perspectives.
For me, yeah. Since it is all weird. And the bunnies are weird, and the little scouts are weird. For me, what defines weird is within the context of this world. A world where it's all weird, but it's things that kind of break the rules of the world. Things that you think would happen again or would have happened before, but never did, just happened once. Then they kind of disappeared.
Yeah, it's interesting. It would be like if a surreal thing happens in a surreal world. It's so surreal that the people within the surreal world go, that's odd.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, this is fun. I'm really excited to get back to talking about some of these strips because they were good the first time around, and, you can never look at Peanuts too much. Now, if you want to figure out, or maybe you can, we're going to medically prove to see if that's true. See if we develop a peanuts allergy.
What's interesting to me also is that the ones we picked collectively, we each picked three, they represent the run of the strip pretty well. Started in 1952 and ended in 1995. Every decade has at least one represented. So it's kind of neat.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah,
That's very
yeah.
good. Good to know he was weird from the beginning and he
Yeah.
maintained it.
And Jimmy, how did you choose your weird strips?
I sat in a chair for about 10 minutes and I closed my eyes and I tried to remember what things I thought were the weirdest. And then I wrote them down, just like, how I could describe it in one sentence. And then I looked to see if we had talked about that on the show. And
Yeah.
if we had, I included it.
One other thing I'd like to just add as going back over these, and I see it in the conversations that we're going to be listening to today, is a sense for me of permission as a cartoonist to do things from the guy I admire the most as a comic strip cartoonist. I just feel permission from Charles Schulz that you can try things, you can do things that are unexpected, maybe considered out of character or just out of character from the strip. And maybe that's not a bad thing at all, right? To break the rules every once in a while. And the funny thing is, if there had been one strip of Snoopy in the Stop with Camel, it would be on our list.
Oh, yes,
But
absolutely.
it was something weird that
number
became
one.
normal. Yeah. And I love that Schulz, these are the ones that just didn't catch on.
Yeah.
Or he just one-offed and that was it. Maybe it would have caught on if he continued it, but he said what he wanted to say and he moves on. And I really appreciate having that perspective on somebody I admire so much that he would try. He would swing for a strange fence. Maybe it was behind the plate. But it shows that, a genius like Schulz would not keep himself inside his box. He keeps moving the edges of the box. Sometimes it's so outside the box he didn't even,
There's no box.
Yeah, there's no box, and it's fun to see him playing and just see what happens with your characters, even if it's not just something you put in a notebook. It's something you put out for the world to see.
Well, yeah, and I think putting stuff out into the world is the final stage that you got to do as a cartoonist because you don't know. I mean, there's a really good chance you could, as someone like Charles Schulz, even do the first World War I flying ace and go, all right, well, I'm not going to put that out. It's too weird. And you wouldn't know the success it had until it got out there. And what Michael said about the one-off strip about, being in a comic strip, that's actually something that I guess you could do really on a web strip these days, which is you try something, you throw it out there. Unless, people are reprinting the entire thing 50 years from now, you can ignore it. You can in a comic strip, you can utterly ignore it and go, oh, that was stupid. I shouldn't have had Schroeder say that and never do it again. And, in like a week, that's sort of forgotten.
Sure. And you kind of expect that. And did I ever tell the story on the podcast, my experience writing on Mystery Science Theater 3000, where there was a rule we were given that was if you were in the process of writing and you decide, oh, no, I don't know. And you don't, it was like, don't erase. There's no erasing. So if you're collecting the information, you never edit yourself. You put it out there, because what we did is we kind of built a database of jokes, and then some of them we might pitch in person to each other to see how people are going, and some of them might just be on, written out,
Right.
And then they're selected by somebody outside of the room where we're all just kind of having fun and bouncing off of each other. And I really took to heart when he said that. Because he said, you may be, in this case, this is collaborative, so you may think of something that you think is like, you're going down this path and you're like, oh, well, that's a dead end. And you back your way out. And, to try to keep safe face or whatever, you get rid of it. And he said, well, that might be a springboard. You might have been heading toward a joke and you don't find the joke. But maybe what you did was a springboard for someone to find the joke. And that was super freeing because there's no judgment and there's a demand that anything you think of that you got down as far as collecting, in words, stays in that world, in that database to be chosen from. And my favorite story for that is we were doing our first national live tour, and we had the super secret surprise show because we hadn't gotten the rights in time to advertise. And it was a really cool movie called Argo Man, the Fantastic Superman. And when I was finishing up writing, and what I would do is I would write for 20 hours, watching the movie, stopping it, watching the movie, stopping. It takes me 20 hours to get through it. So every time I was reacting to something, even if I just had gone 3 seconds forward in the movie and stopped it and then wrote a joke, it would be fresh to me in the sense that I don't know where the movie's going.
Oh,
Those are my own personal rules. Everybody had their own things. Some people just told jokes in the room, and they never even saw the movie at all until they were live, and someone was collecting the jokes as they were saying them. But you had the right to write in advance, and that was more my speed. And so here I am at the end of Argo Man, the Fantastic Superman, which is such a fun movie, but it's so goofy. And at the end, I was literally giddy watching this thing for 20 hours. And I remember this very last shot of the film is this camera zoom in on a mantelpiece where this antique clock is. And there was this running joke about time and in the film, which I won't go into, but I was so in such a weird place. I just wrote the silliest ending, and essentially it was something like, "Hi, it's me, Clocky." It's like it's time to wind up this film, and it's like a good night, God bless, and may the good Lord keep you ticking. So that was my riff. Now, Diane, my wife, she had transcribed the movie, so she had already seen it. One of the only people who had seen it before the writers, because she had to put the script stuff in to give us something to write around, in the collection of the jokes. And so I went down, and I was still in my giddy state, and I showed her that last joke, and she was like, "No, you have to erase that. Joel's going to fire you. That's terrible." And I was like, "Nope, not allowed to." In my giddy state, and then 2 weeks later, we're in the office, and the walls are kind of thin, and I'd completely forgotten about it. And Joel was going over the jokes with one of his top writers and editors, and they were selecting the gags, trying them out. And all of a sudden, I hear Joel in this high-pitched voice going, "Hi, it's me, Clocky."
Oh,
I was like, "Oh."
that's awesome.
And the weird thing is, that was the last joke of the show, word for word. That was the end of the show. And it actually got in there, and if I had taken it out, it wouldn't have been there. So I'm grateful for the process of being able to be silly and be goofy, and it's seasoning, right? You wouldn't want every joke to be that,
Right.
but every once in a while, maybe where you were is where you think somebody thinks the audience is, and something that wouldn't normally goes in is the perfect place to put it.
Well, that is a fantastic insight into that process, and adding the collaborative element. That's very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, if you guys want to follow along with the shenanigans that go along with this podcast, the first thing you got to do is go over to our website, unpackingpeanuts.com, sign up for the Great Peanuts Reread. That will get you one email a month that will let you know what we're up to. So you can be prepared, even if things get really weird, like they're going to right now. Here is our first sequence, the Truffles sequence. This is from 1975. All right, who selected the Truffle sequence?
I did.
Ooh, very exciting. Tell us your thoughts behind that.
Well, when I was preparing the script for what we were going to be talking about, I remembered that Michael had suggested, if we did an episode of just the weird strips.
But if we do a special episode on the weirdest peanut strips, I would definitely nominate these.
Well, first off, we got to do that now. That's an episode for sure.
Well, we maybe get some listener input on that.
Oh, yeah. What do you think is the weirdest, most peanut sequence?
I wanted to include that.
You acknowledge the origin of this episode all those years ago.
Well, that is awesome. So what it would be, we'll in a second, we'll take a trip in the old Peanuts time machine back to what we were saying. But do you guys have anything else to say about Truffles? I remember being really intrigued and having a lot to say about her character design.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, as we're going to hear. I think my memory of this is what I guess you'd call fever dream. This is fever dream Schultz, where something happens that isn't logical. It's more coincidental because it's tangential. And so Schultz is just messing with your mind here, where you just feel like, yeah, the logic of this doesn't really add up, but you kind of see where he's going. It's weird.
It's weird. All right, let's take a trip back in the time machine and see what's what. March 31st. Okay, now we're in the middle of another kind of long sequence. So this is the beginning-ish of a long sequence. Linus and Snoopy are on the hunt because Linus has decided he's going to go out and find some truffles. And he needs a truffle hound, so of course he gets Snoopy to go with him. But in fact, they come up and they meet a young lady whose name is Truffles. That's quite a coincidence. And here they are. Here they are. Truffles is sitting under a tree, and Linus and Snoopy are talking with her. Truffles says, I said, if you find anything, just remember that you're digging on our property. Truffles says, actually, this is my grandfather's farm. Linus now stands up and says, gee, I apologize. I didn't even think about trespassing. We're hunting for truffles. And Truffles says, with a smile on her face, well, you found one. Linus says, we did? And then she reveals, that's my name, Truffles. To which Snoopy, and probably a lot of readers, says, oh, good grief.
Yeah. Also, they were trespassing in someone else's comic strip. Because this is not a Schultz character. This is like
I love it. This is not a Schultz. This is
like a Broomhilda character.
I love this character design for some reason. I mean, I get what you're saying. It doesn't matter. But it's so goofy. It's a really cute character, I think.
Yeah,
the fact that her mouth touches the bottom of her, like it's so much lower than any other Peanuts character. The nose, the eyes.
So weird.
Well, this reads in the comic book world, because let's face it, they all look like freaky monsters. But this reads as ugly. And so I was really surprised when later on they talk about how beautiful she was, because this reads ugly. I mean, in comic book language.
All right, I don't know if I see that. But,
in the first three panels, she doesn't really stay the same character in terms of the design. He's just kind of winging it as he goes here, and yeah, I think it's a really odd design. I mean, for whatever reason, I don't know, some of these strips that are in the 75 books are all in line. The ink line, it just seems like we're not seeing his ink line. We're seeing his ink line that has been reproduced and smudged and, and very spread much out. And that does not do Truffles justice, I will say. But I will give her that she's wearing a cool Mondrian
dress.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. But I will say my favorite part of this strip is in the first panel, Snoopy peeking around Linus, who's peeking around the tree at Truffles. So that is a darn cute Snoopy.
April 1st, Truffles continues. She says to Linus, do you think Truffles is a funny name? And Linus says, no, I think it's kind of cute. Truffles says, my grandfather likes me. He says I am as rare as a truffle, so he calls me Truffles. Old people calling their daughters or granddaughters rare. So
yeah, why is that a thing? Yeah,
I don't know.
Interesting.
In the next panel, Linus says, well, my name is Linus, and this is Snoopy. He's sort of an unusual dog. Truffle says, can he do tricks? To which Snoopy says, see this coin? Now watch carefully. I don't know why. That just really makes me laugh. I have mixed feelings about this whole sequence. There's the weird Linus Snoopy rivalry, because what ends up happening is Linus falls in love with Truffles for some reason, and Snoopy also loves Truffles, and Snoopy won't take Linus back to visit Truffles, and Linus can't find his way back because this genius who can write her a letter, so he has her address, cannot find his way back to her house. Can't do it. It's impossible.
It's a very, very weird sequence.
Very weird sequence. And I love, though, that what I love at the end is that Snoopy was just there for the cookies. I think that is...
Yeah.
That's one of those instances when I think the punchline at the end is like, all right, that's really fun. I really like that.
Yeah, I like it when Snoopy gets shivved by the weather vane, the rooster weather.
Yeah. My favorite part of any discussion is when we look at something by Schultz and Michael goes, "This is not Schultz."
It's not the rules. It's not following the rules.
So that was good to see this. So is this tough for you, Michael, or are you able to enjoy it as just the weird exercise? Or is this like, could this also be subtitled your least favorite strips?
Well, it's not always the case. Of my three, I love one of these sequences and I hate another one. Yeah.
Very exciting. You'll tell us which one when we get there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's pretty good. All right. So that is the Truffle sequence from 1975. So if you haven't done the complete reread, first off, what's wrong with you? But secondly, you got to get hip to Truffles. So let me ask you guys this, and all three of you can weigh in. What do you think is the weirdest Peanuts decade?
Ooh, that's tough. Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to think in terms of decades because they kind of slide into one another.
Yeah.
There's definitely these in-between periods, which is neither one nor the other. No, they're scattered around. In the 90s, he was doing stuff, which I don't think any of us picked because they were almost too weird. The one where Snoopy's like coming in with the D-Day forces.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff like that is like, he's not even trying to keep this in the world. He's just doing whatever he wants.
Yeah. And I sort of agree. I think that last 2 or 3 years of Peanuts, especially I think the Sundays, which were, they're a huge physical toll to do, that Sunday page. And, 1 week you might have to just slap a giant picture of Eisenhower and call it a day.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would agree the 90s because it's the decade that I least experienced as a younger person, where I just absorb it and it's not weird anymore.
Right.
Some of this was undigested.
Right. I think I agree. That's probably most weird is the 90s, even though that probably won't be reflected in this episode. But I think you could make a case that the first 5 years, like 50 to 50, well, say 50 to 53, to a general audience might seem weird just because it looks so different. And so much of the characters, like I think.
Yeah, Charlie Brown's acting weird in 50 to 52. Right. Yeah, compared
Snoopy's
to what we know now.
Just a puppy. It's shocking when we went back and saw how many, 1954 strips were already like in the pantheon of great strips. But those first 3 years, I think you could find probably a lot of weirdness.
But that was the case of Schultz still working out what he wanted this to be.
Yeah. All right, our second sequence. Oh, speaking of the 90s, this is October 5th and 6th, 1995, and it's Spike and Woodstock go to the moon.
Yeah, I picked this one just, again, because of the search. It came up as one we talked about as weird. And this is a classic one where we have a really interesting conversation between, what's acceptable in the world.
And that's also something I did discover through the course of reading all these strips and discussing them with you guys, is that sometimes the best strips didn't necessarily facilitate the best conversation because, if you have people go, yep, that's pretty good, there's less to talk about. But I did like it when we'd get into, and that's one of the reasons I was insistent that I want to read the whole thing, because you have to go into these weird corners and go, what was going on here, man? What's up with marbles? I don't think you can fully understand the Schultz genius until you understand marbles. All right, let's take another trip back in the time machine and see what's up with Spike and Woodstock on the moon. October 5th. This is a sequence where Woodstock decides he's going to go to the moon. I actually really like this weird sequence for some reason, partly because I just think Woodstock looks cute in the space helmet. But here he is, and he's gone to the moon, and he meets who else but Spike. So we see him ask a question to Spike, and Spike answers, "Is this the moon?" And Spike says, "Sometimes I wonder." And then Woodstock asks a question, and Spike says, "How did I get here?" And then Spike answers with, "Well, I like to think I came up the hard way."
This sequence really bothers me.
Why?
Even though the world is totally nuts and peanuts, there's still certain rules. And to me, this just is not even in the strip. I mean, this can't be in the continuity. If this was a dream.
Well, I don't think he's really on the moon.
But he is.
I think he's just imagining it.
Why are they agreeing that they're on the moon?
Because,
I mean, is he with Spike?
Well, this is what, when I saw this sequence, and it started me thinking again, we've talked so much about the characters' imaginative lives as we've gone through the strips. And this was a really stark reminder that in the Peanut strips, characters pull other characters into their imaginations.
Their reality, yeah.
Which is, I think, unique to Peanuts in a certain way. I mean, you see it in how fluid it is, right?
No, the problem is, I think Spike was a bad choice because Woodstock and Spike have no relationship. And so if this is Woodstock imagining it, why would he imagine it with somebody he might have met, I don't know, once?
No, I think he
lives far away. So it's clearly not Spike really there.
No, I think it is Spike really there. And Woodstock, like Harold was saying, is bringing him into his play. He's like...
But Spike doesn't know Woodstock.
Or Spike is hallucinating.
Well, Spike does have an imaginative bent to himself out in the
yeah, he's talking.
He's interesting because he pulls himself in and out of his dreams, right? He's trying to have a more grandiose life out in the middle of nowhere. And so he invents
but this
characters.
Is a bird he doesn't know. No, to me, this violates the rules.
Okay.
So you have to know someone in order to be pulled into their reality? It's part of the rules?
Okay, the Marcy and Snoopy, the air ace stuff bothers me a bit because she's clearly in his World War I fantasies and seems to be joining him in the fantasies. But at least they're in proximity to each other. And people seem to be able to read his mind.
Yeah.
When he's thinking. I don't know if all of them can.
It comes and goes, doesn't it? I mean, this year you got Snoopy saying, characters thinking about something or saying something out loud, a human character, and then Snoopy is replying essentially in a way that makes it sound like, well, you can't know what I'm thinking. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
In the Peanuts world, this turns on and off.
It's just that Spike's never been involved in any of those relationships. And
but
there's no point in picking him. I mean,
that's why, though, because he goes and he doesn't know who he is.
Well, what about Spike in the World War trench where he's a fighter?
Well, didn't like that at all either.
Okay, hold on.
But if it's breaking the rules multiple times, then maybe it's a rule.
You don't have to have your rules. I would not do this if I was Schultz.
What I think the reason that he picked Spike is because he doesn't know Woodstock. And that's why he goes there and is able to ask him, is this the moon? He wouldn't ask Linus necessarily, is this the moon? But anyway, moving on. October 6th. They're standing in the desert / the moon, and Spike says...
And there's Earth.
Well, there's not Earth. That's the moon, I think, that we're seeing Spike pretend.
I don't know. I see a Zipatone, Australia.
It's clearly a map of Earth. I mean, it's totally detailed.
And Spike says to Woodstock, yes, we're standing on the moon, and that's the Earth we're looking at. Before you go back, there's something over here you shouldn't miss. And Spike tries to sell Woodstock some moon rocks.
Yeah, when you're out in the desert, it always ultimately comes down to souvenirs.
Yeah, you got All right. Well, since we don't need to discuss that further, since we don't want to hurt Michael's head anymore.
No, I'm just pretending it never happened.
All right. No, I'm just pretending it never happened. That's what I'm talking about. You're not going to get that kind.
That's the
of
title.
comment.
That's the title. I'm just pretending it never happened. The weirdest strips in the strips of all time.
It. So sometimes there's fun journeys to other planets that fall under the umbrella of weirdness, and sometimes it's just absurd and awful body horror. Like on January 25th, 1990, a real David Cronenberg-esque peanut strip, which is Charlie Brown sharpens himself.
Yeah, this one also I brought up, and this is a very, very weird sequence. Talk about fever dream. So yeah, Charlie Brown, as we're going to hear, is at the school pencil sharpener, and he somehow managed to get at least his shirt caught in there, and it's sucking him into the pencil sharpener, and the art is so strange. And the thing that would have made this one step less weird is that if it had been an electric pencil sharpener under its own power, that is kind of the horror of the combine in the farm.
Got pulled in, right.
But this one has a little hand crank, and it's impossible to have happened what happened. Impossible. And that's what I think takes us to the level of weird that makes it to this show.
Now, let me ask Michael this before we hit the time machine. If you're reading along and you come along across a strip like this, will this set you off more, or would, like, say, Spike and Woodstock on the Moon? Or is that the same? Is it at the heart the same thing, and that it's defying the laws of the world?
This wouldn't bother me as much. I wouldn't think it was a good strip. Because of that, I'd say this is a terrible strip and a bad idea, but it's still mostly housed in reality. There could be a mishap with a pencil sharpener. It just wouldn't be this extreme.
Right.
A mishap with the pencil sharpener could be another title.
This does make one of my least favorite peanut strips, just because, like, anything that just the thought of Charlie Brown getting grounded up in a pencil sharpener is just too disturbing for me.
Yeah.
I have a very delicate sensibility, Okay, here we go now. January 25th.
Here we go.
I can't wait to talk about this one. A bunch of randos that we have never seen are standing in line to sharpen their pencils. The first one says, "Why do we have to stand in line for everything?" Then the next one says, "What's the holdup?" And then the next kid says, "Probably an overturned vehicle." And he really needs to get his pencil sharpened, because he has like a whole handful of them. Then another kid says, "Push him out of there." And then the last one says, "What's taking you so long, Charles?" Which is wild that they call him Charles. And then, by the way, this is all one panel. And then in the last part of the panel, we see, what do we see? We see Charlie Brown's clothes being sucked into the pencil sharpener. Is that right? Or are we seeing Charlie Brown himself being pulled into the pencil sharpener? I'm not sure. But anyway, the what's left of Charlie Brown, which does not have a head, says, "I like a pencil with a fine point."
Well, this is part of a sequence. So this is the finale of a sequence with this pencil sharpener, which is probably the weirdest sequence of dailies he did. I mean, it certainly wasn't worth a week's worth of strips.
So how does it all start? How does the sequence start, Mike?
I don't remember anything.
Well, it didn't have something to do with the little red-haired girl. He was trying to get her attention, and he was going to go up and sharpen his pencil. That's what I remember anyway.
That works usually.
So she's in the classroom again. So little red-haired girl who's hopping around from being in the schoolyard or just being in the neighborhood. Now it appears that she's in his class.
Oh, no. You know what? I think I just figured it out.
What's that?
Charlie Brown has face blindness. And they just new red-haired kids moved into town. And he's like, "The red-haired girl's back." He doesn't know it's a different person.
Okay. Man. Well, that kid in the middle of the 5 kids waiting in line, I think is Marcy's brother.
Yeah, you think so? Well, what about someone calling him Charles like Marcy?
Well, that
Yeah,
that could be Lydia without the hairband.
Could be Marcy without the glasses.
They are all having a rough day, whoever they are. They look disheveled.
This is weird. This is the least Schultzy peanut strip I've ever seen.
It's so
Interesting.
weird.
It breaks every rule. If someone said this is what the 90s is going to look like, I would have run the other way.
Wow.
I mean, one panel, zip-a-tone, characters you've never seen before, and this bizarre headless Charlie Brown.
What has happened to him? What do you think?
Isn't he trying to get out of his clothes because he's strapped?
So I don't know how this works, but he's wearing a short sleeve sweater, right?
Well, they say it's a sweater, and then later we see that it actually now has a long sleeve. I'm not sure if that's because it's destroyed by the pencil sharpener, but whatever. But he has a sweater, which it has his trademark stripe on it
With a collar.
and that's what's caught in the pencil sharpener.
Yeah. It's very odd. And then his other sleeve does not show any fingers or hand or arm.
No.
So I don't know.
He's
exactly
struggling
what's
to
going
take it off.
Yeah, I suppose.
Okay, so you guys are saying Charlie Brown is tucked in there, or is that like the top of his head we're seeing?
Well, he's talking. You don't see his head. Well, yeah, you do see a little curve there. Yeah, he's trying to. He can't get away, and he's trying to take the sweater off. So
I got it.
Oh,
okay.
You didn't get. Yeah, that would. This definitely goes in our weirdest strip.
I'm not joking. Like, I could not tell you what was happening. I was very confused. I'm like, did he sharpen his hand off? It looks very grotesque to me.
Yeah. You could read it that way, I guess. It's so surreal anyway, so you can put your own rules on it, trying to make sense of it. Boy, I do remember that the pencil sharpener was an important part of the schoolroom. You know, it was a big deal for me to go up and sharpen my pencil. And the smell of the wood shavings and the graphite, and oh boy, it was. I don't know why we didn't have those little tiny pencil sharpeners where you just had it at your desk. But it was the communal pencil sharpener was a big deal in school. I don't know if it still is. They
work better, the mechanical ones rather than those little ones.
They have apps for that now.
You know, I don't think you can buy a Boston pencil sharpener anymore.
What?
Which is the best pencil sharpener. As my illustration professor would say, it makes a fine Roman spear point. But I was looking for one recently, and you can only find them used.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, so sometimes weirdness takes you to other planets. Sometimes weirdness gets you ground up Fargo style. And sometimes it's just a weird new character. Like here on September 4th, 1986, where we get to meet good old Tapioca Pudding.
This also was one that I had nominated. I love this sequence. We'll hear about it, but just for the sake of the intro, yeah, Tapioca Pudding, new character shows up for probably less than maybe 5 strips or less. And she's all about becoming a licensed character and being on lunchboxes. And it's so fun to see this character. This is the world of when Calvin and Hobbes is coming out, and Bill Watterson is being very critical of licensing and being open about it. And I think it's in the air, and I think this is Schultz processing it and making a statement that, yeah, it's part of my world, but it's not the core of who I am and why I do the strip. And I love that. It's him able to editorialize within the strip about licensing and where it fits in the world and where it gets a little crazy.
September 4th. Okay, now here we are. Here is the big moment. God. New character alert. It's Tapioca Pudding. So she's standing in front of class and she says, "Good morning. I'm new here in this school. I shall now introduce myself." And she does in panel 2. "My name is Tapioca Pudding. With my name, my blonde hair, and my smile, my dad says we can make $1 million. And then in the last panel, she says directly to Linus, apparently, who's sitting in his desk, "My dad is in licensing."
This almost reads to me, when I saw this, I went like, no, this can't be true. This is almost like a Mad Magazine parody of Peanuts.
Right? Yeah, that Schultz is doing it himself is pretty neat. I really enjoy it. It's a repetitive sequence, but it didn't get old for me.
But also, I mean, this was Frieda's shtick.
Mm-hmm.
When Frieda was introduced, all she had was talking about her curly hair, and to everyone she met, she talked about her naturally curly hair. And this girl has naturally curly hair and is talking about her hair.
Yeah, and that gigantic smile. And it's funny, we know that Schultz was getting a little bit of heat for the licensing, it maybe in smaller circles, but he was probably getting back to him that certain cartoonists were like, he's selling out or whatever. And it's interesting to show that Schultz is like, I'm not interested in the licensing. The licensing is the least interesting thing to me. And anybody who's into licensing is a little messed up.
Yeah, it seems extremely pointed. I mean, it feels like he was definitely having a bad day about licensing or a couple bad days.
Right. And we talked about this before, that the version of Peanuts that you experience in licensing, if you never read the strip, is much different than the feeling of the strip that you get if you just read the strip. And her gigantic smile, and, this, when she presents herself to the world, my name is Tapioca Pudding. She's got her arms outstretched. She looks like a little plush toy, a little doll. And I think it's funny and fascinating. And I think this was actually probably a smart move for Schultz to do that. If this is how he was feeling about it, he didn't really say anything. He's making fun of it at the same time. He's not.
Yeah, I wouldn't be happy.
I'm obviously not going to stop doing the licensing.
I wouldn't be happy if she was a regular character.
No, I don't even feel like he intended her to be an ongoing thing. It feels like this feels like Joe Rich Kid. Like, hey, I'm coming in here to do my bit.
Well, he's done that so much with recent characters. They are so one note. You got Maynard, the tutor. You're not seeing sides of characters the way we've gotten to know Linus and Lucy and Snoopy and Charlie Brown and Pepper
This is like a 1 week affair here.
Yeah, it seemed like as he was developing new characters, less and less, maybe because it wasn't necessary, because he had these nuanced characters that whenever he introduced somebody else, it had to represent something they didn't. And so it was one thing, and Tapioca Pudding obviously could have developed a personality and had a few more things going for her, but that's not what Schultz is doing here.
She does have the unique ability to levitate, though.
Yeah, right?
I mean,
that fourth panel.
And the second one, too. Where Linus is sitting, you don't see the bottom of the desk, but you see her feet at the same level as the middle of the desk.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me because it's just faked perspective. But the last one, she's definitely floating at his middle of his desk. Or at least it looks to me more that way. But what are you going to do? September 6th, there's more Tapioca Pudding. She comes up to Snoopy and says, "Hi, my name is Tapioca Pudding. Someday, wouldn't you like to own a lunchbox or a t-shirt with my picture on it?" Snoopy just walks away looking a little dismayed. And Tapioca yells after him, "Licensing is very big these days." So from the ridiculous to the really dark, we have January 9th, 1976, which is the demise, the ultimate demise of the original school building that Sally goes to, which to this day I find kind of shocking is in Peanuts.
Yeah, I agree. This definitely deserves to be in this list. It is on a lot of levels really unnerving.
But, I looked at it a different way when I was thinking about these strips, because although the Peanuts school building does take itself out of this mortal coil, apparently it's still immortal because its consciousness
right.
It still goes on. So, there's some hope anyway. Okay, so next, what's up is a sequence that's a little it's very off the beaten path, and I just want to give a little heads up if people are sensitive about things. Weirdly enough, this sequence talks about suicide, so if that's not something you want to hear about, just skip ahead a few minutes and we'll meet you there. But for the rest of you, we go to January 8th. It's Sally's school building, and we see some of the kids wandering in for the start of a school day. And the school building thinks to himself, here they come again with their peanut butter lunches. How depressing. The principal complains that I don't have enough rooms. The teachers say I'm cold. The building inspector always criticizes me. The custodians hate me. I'm really depressed. I'd cry, but I hate to streak my windows.
I was assuming somehow it wasn't the entire school that was thinking, it was this particular wall. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of shocked, like, oh my God, he's the whole school.
Well, here, let's go to the second just so we can figure out what happens here. Because then on January 9th, Charlie Brown walks out in his jammies to his front step, and he picks up the morning paper, and he reads the headline that says, school building collapses during night. Good grief. He goes in and reads to Sally. Don't bother to get up, Sally. Our school fell over last night. Listen to this. Then we cut back to the school, which has been reduced to a pile of bricks. And the bricks are just thinking to themselves, I had all I could take. And it even goes on later in this sequence where Sally is doing a presentation because they have to go to a different school. And she describes it as her school committing suicide, which I talk me through all of this. I'm not sure. This kind of truly scrambled my brain in a way, because I just, I guess if someone had asked me, hey, how many suicides are there in Peanuts? My answer would have been 0. Even though I've read this before, it didn't strike me as it did this time.
But it seems to me that the bricks themselves are sentient. So he's not really dead.
It's not really gone.
He's broken down into his component beings.
Which takes the edge off a little.
It does take the edge. Well,
Yeah, though the bricks will be used in another building, and then so he lives on.
Well, I don't mean talk me through it as I'm not sitting here upset about it.
Jimmy, it's okay. The bricks are still alive.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. I appreciate it. Isn't this weird?
Well, of course
to me, this is weird.
It is, and I was reading these, of course, chronologically, and the first one that you just read, Jimmy, was one I picked because, that little moment there where you're seeing his thoughts, and he's just talking about how depressing this is to him, that he's just kind of lost his joy of being a school building, and then he'd say, I'd cry, but I hate to streak my windows. I mean, that strip just by itself, if nothing had happened after it, just kind of hit me. It's like, oh wow, that's Schultz is having us empathize with a sentient building. That's pretty amazing. And then the surprise of that he just falls in a heap, or I guess it's a he. I don't know if we ever know if anyone calls him a he or a she, but just that one little moment was like, that Schultz is willing to go to this place that nobody in comics would have, and maybe wouldn't have gotten away with, right?
Oh, wouldn't have gotten I will
level
say that.
Of trust
yes.
that people have put in Schultz based on these 25 years of making the strip. Somehow he can take us to this place. He's earned this right to say things to us with his strip that I don't think others can.
And can you imagine anyone even considering it?
Right.
Like, it's very strange. The other thing about it is I do personally have a very, very pitch black sense of humor just in my personal life, that one of my therapists actually once said, do you think it's good to make jokes like that? And I actually really had to think about it. And to me, it's such a huge relief, because you're taking the power away from it, and you're not, especially something like this, which is so dark and so, unthinkable. If you can find a way to make it a joke, in some ways, you're not there. You know what I mean? You're not in it. You're not being held down by it. I think it's interesting that Schultz went to this place after he's married again, in a happy location, he's doing okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we've heard stories of he's the kind of guy that would just late at night, just like Snoopy sometimes when he's sitting in the dark and he's just asking these existential questions that Schultz kind of said, that's who I am. You know, I have these lots of dark nights of the soul.
Yeah. 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 And I'm glad that he was in a place at this point where he could talk about this type of thing and not feel like it was, you know, a yoke on him personally. I think at least that's what I'm, you know, inferring from all this.
Yeah. And then, you know, to see Sally the next day just running to the school, you know, saying, school, school, school. Why did you do it? Why did you do it? Even there's like this.
That's devastating.
The school building. It's sad, but it's also somebody cared about this school, you know? Yeah. It is
like it's a little girl crying because her school building committed suicide, but it's not. It's a cartoon drawing of a little girl upset because her school committed suicide. Actually, it's just ink lines. It's when you get to the absolute abstraction of what is making us have these emotional and intellectual reactions, it really is like magic. Like,
well, the magic is if you consider everything being alive, which is very Zen, I believe.
Well, it's so funny it's an Eastern or maybe even like Native American type of worldview. You know, this rock, this pitcher's mound has a soul and an identity. It's a pretty wild place for him to go. Good old Charles Schultz from St. Paul.
May I add or pose a different way of looking at it?
You sure can.
You haven't mentioned that the message that I took out of it, which is this is Schultz talking about the crisis in the school.
Well,
school's not getting enough money to
funding the You know, wow, when you think about it as just the crumbling infrastructure of roads and schools and stuff like that, that could very well have been something on his mind. Well, we have done this for quite a while now, so how about we take a break, come back, and then we'll finish some more weird strips.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. You've heard us rave about the Estabrook Radio 914. And what episode would be complete without mention of the Fab Four? Now you can wear our obsessions proudly with Unpacking Peanuts t-shirts. We have a Be of Good Cheer pen nib design, along with the four of us crossing Abbey Road, and, of course, Michael, Jimmy, and Harold at the Thinkin' Wall. Collect them all, trade them with your friends. Order your t-shirts today at unpackingpeanuts.com/store.
All right, we are back. Shall we get back to these comic strips?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, well, we're going back hard with a real weird one. July 5th, 1973. Sometimes weird is body horror. Sometimes weird is a dog and a bird on the moon. And sometimes weird is just Alfred E. Newman appearing in the sky. You know, I still think I really do love the Mr. Sack sequence. I understand why it's Schultz's favorite. I'm not 100% still sold on this ending, but
yeah, I think there are little different ways you can look at it. I think one of the ways we were looking at, you know, this is Charlie Brown basically wearing a paper sack over his head and all of a sudden becoming super popular at camp. And, you know, one of the things you could take away from that is that it's the look of Charlie Brown. It's the way he looks, that if he wears a sack, all of a sudden he can become popular, which is not always the best moral of the story. But it also could be, it's not so much how they are reacting to him, but how he's presenting himself when he knows he's not seen. So lots of ways to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. July 5th. It's getting light. The sun is coming up. Charlie Brown covers his eyes and says, I can't look. I can't stand the suspense, but I have to look. I have to know. Will I see the sun or will I see a baseball? What will I see? Panel 3, we see he finally pulls his hands away from his eyes. He looks. And in panel 4, instead of the sun, we see Mad Magazine mascot Alfred E. Newman saying, what? Me worry? And Charlie Brown just says, good grief.
Oh, man.
So what do you think about that, Michael?
The Alfred E. Newman?
Yeah.
It looks like he traced it.
You probably did, right?
Yeah. It's not in the Schultz style at all. I don't know. This is not my favorite sequence.
Mhm.
It seems to me that, Schultz said something about it didn't have a message, but it seems the message to me is that it was his face that's been holding him back his whole life, which is something you can't do anything about. It's sort of like all his problems are caused by the way he looks.
Well, I think of that as being symbolic. It's all his problems are caused by him being Charlie Brown. And he is a bald kid at age 8, So, I mean, I'm sure there is a weirdness factor to it. But I think what it is just, to me, it's like that mask allows him, the same way like a superhero would wear a mask, right? It allows him to be something else to people rather than his mundane self, which is constantly ridiculed and picked on. I mean, as we see, like you said, as soon as the kid sees his real face, he's like, forget it.
I don't know if that scans, because the kid nominates him for camp president solely because he's got a sack on his head.
Right.
Which has its own
he
meaning,
hasn't said
right?
anything or done anything to earn this honor.
Well, he did. He's wearing a sack on his head. I think that is what it is.
It made him stand out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. You think about the idea of wearing a sack as a statement, say in 1973, that's a fashion statement. There's something bold about that. There is something to wearing a sack and sticking with it. That is, I can kind of see. I can't see the adults accepting it, but the kids accepting it is a kind of a strange thing that I could kind of get from what I remember, what it was like to be growing up in 1973. There was just a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty, and it was the idea of making statements through fashion, your own thing it strangely kind of does flow with the times. And the fact that it ends with Alfred E. Neuman, it's interesting that he puts What Me Worry over Alfred E. Neuman. It's like he needed a little help, I guess, get people to where he was going with this strip. He wanted to get as many people over the finish line as he could. But once again, I mean, Schultz is like right on top of the zeitgeist. There were 2 years that Mad Magazine had a circulation of over 2 million copies, and it was in 1973 and 1974. So once again, Schultz is just right on the pulse. And just for some reference, there was no other comic book or comic magazine that was even half that. Mad Magazine was its own phenomenon in this era.
Well, to me, it is proof of my hypotheses of Schultz as a character in Peanuts. I mean, I think this is absolute proof. I mean, who would make the sun look like Alfred E. Neumann with lettering above its head? It's Charles Schultz, right? And who would put Charlie Brown through this thing? It's Charles Schultz, And it's weird because it's almost like, and by the way, like he'll know if he's crazy or not. And what he saw was the icon of mad.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's not encouraging, right?
Well, I would love to know at what points Schultz knew where this was going. Did he go all the way and then sit and noodle at his desk the very last day? And that was like, because I think if I were Schultz, I would be really questioning this. That made him laugh, but it's like, can I pull this off? Can I actually get away with this as the final joke in this long sequence? He must have thought it was pretty daring.
Yeah, it is daring. I mean, I don't know that I love it as a punchline. I love it as confirmation of my theory.
Well, there you go.
We're heading back to the 60s now for a little bit of classic monster movie stuff. This is where Linus's blanket comes alive and starts attacking Lucy, which I think is truly, truly weird, disturbing. And Harold said fever dream earlier. This literally does feel like something Schultz could have dreamt up when he was under the weather and loaded up on Theraflu. March 17th. Linus is standing in his living room in classic thumb and blanket position. Lucy is looking on. She's scowling and upset. She says, "Now look here." And in panel 2, she's yelling at Linus saying, "When you're not around, you keep that blanket locked up in your room. Do you hear me? It's a menace. It hates me." In the third panel, Linus is standing in front of the closet door and says, "Okay, how's that?" And in the last panel, we see the blanket sneaking out from underneath the locked closet door.
It's the blob.
Yeah, I love he's doing a horror strip for these few. This ran for a while. Actually, we're coming in the middle. Yeah, this
Right.
blanket turns in, I mean, for good reason, hates Lucy.
Well, Michael, give us the whole setup of what this sequence is about.
Well, Harold mentioned it's The Blob, which was one of the most popular horror flicks.
But in the context of these strips, what is happening with the blanket and Lucy and everything?
It's sentient. The blanket hates Lucy, and it's turned into some kind of horror creature.
The fact that you like this blows my mind. Blows my mind. I was reading these last night and thinking, oh my God, Michael must hate these strips, and we're just going to talk about how terrible they are. I can't believe you like it. Harold, what are your thoughts about these?
I remember this as a kid, and I remember, boy, this had a huge impact because, yeah, it is this creeping, crawling thing that does not like Lucy, and she's genuinely frightened by this thing.
Yeah.
It is.
This reminds me, there was a Dick Van Dyke episode that was a horror episode.
Walnut.
Yeah, the walnuts, right? Where they're people are being like body snatched by the aliens and only eating walnuts or something like that.
I'm looking at you.
Yes, that's right. Eyes are in the back of their heads. Yes.
Yeah. So no, I would like to know why the blanket lost its sentience later. I have no problem with the blanket being a character.
So you don't mind it gaining sentience. You just want to understand why it's lost it,
or why it was just ignored afterwards. I need reasons here.
All right. Well, this is my take on it. Quentin Tarantino. I think this is obvious from reading Amelia, but one of my huge influences is Quentin Tarantino. And I was listening to an interview with him where he's talking about Brian De Palma, who's his favorite director. And they're talking about Bonfire of the Vanities. And he says, only a truly great artist could go that wrong. And that's how I feel about this sequence. Like, this was nuts to me. This whole thing I don't get, I think is weird. I'm so glad it never came back. Larry Ruttman hated it at the Syndicate. He called it monster stuff. Weird. And it's so, but it's so worth talking about. A, because I'm totally fascinated that you liked it. I think that's so cool. And B, I want to know, you only become a great artist by risking huge failure. Like, to be a great artist is to constantly be courting failure because you're constantly pushing at the edge of what you can do. It doesn't matter what, if you're just doing something that's very cute, but you're pushing to the absolute edge of cuteness, that's a risk. If you do something that's violent and you're pushing the violence, that's a risk. You're going to get to a part where you start maybe alienating some people, but you got to do it because you don't know, if you don't explore, you're not going to find what fruitful stuff there is to find. And this fantasy stuff for Schultz does pay off in huge ways later.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how Schultz deals with this character because it does remind me of these horror films. I mean, mainly I think of like horror and sci-fi films of the 50s where essentially they're morality plays, sometimes in disguise and sometimes not at all in disguise, where you have somebody getting a comeuppance through some means that is absolutely out of people's control. And what you see in this strip in this series of strips is that this, we know Lucy's not been kind to Linus. She's been rough on Linus. And it's like Schultz can't have Linus get the comeuppance. And so he creates something that's already in the world and imbues it with this power that is taking on Lucy, and essentially it's vengeance. To me, the way I read it is it's vengeance for Linus, where Linus himself would not do the vengeance. And so, and what you see in the strips, I think this is what makes it work for those that it does work for. And these totally worked for me as a kid. Because as a kid in particular, I was just accepting peanuts for peanuts. I wasn't saying, well, that doesn't work here, or that. I wasn't in that space. I was just experiencing peanuts. And because this was happening, that was part of the world. And it was genuinely frightening, but it was in the sense like this blanket was after her because Lucy is Lucy toward Linus. And the thing that makes it work for me is look at how Linus responds.
if Linus were like, hey, this is my
Right.
blanket, and in my blanket's going to meet justice for me. He doesn't do that. He's just almost as frightened as Lucy is, even though he's not the one being attacked. The classic Linus hair just going straight out in the air we see over and over again in these strips. He's genuinely shocked by this thing. And yet, the weird thing is he's shocked by it, but it's not like he's trying to get rid of it. It's his blanket. It's this really weird dynamic. But if Linus was into this thing, I think it would just totally turn everybody against it. But the fact that Linus himself, this thing he's attached to, it's like this extension of himself is somehow his id is coming out and attacking Lucy is, and you can read it that way or you don't have to. But that to me is kind of what makes it work for those that it would work for.
Well, a security guard would attack people who attack you. So I guess a security blanket should be doing the same.
Exactly.
Right.
I'd like to see this as a graphic novel. Starting with, the blanket being exposed to an atomic bomb test, or gamma rays or something. No, it's a great little story.
Well, the way it does work for what you're saying is like why it gains and loses sentience. It does go back to my meta theory and what Harold is saying. It does because Charles Schulz says it can for this little period of time, and then it just stops.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's done what it needs to do, and so now it can go back to what it's normal. And that is so sci-fi of the 50s and early 60s.
Yeah, that's one of my faves. And it doesn't bother me at all. As a matter of fact, I'd love to see that blanket come back.
All right. Well, this is something I know you don't like, Michael. We're going now to March 14th, 1960. It's the Whirly Beagle. What do you have to say about Snoopy as a helicopter?
Boy, I'm sure we went into depth on this one. I don't have to add much. So, anyway, I was horrified when that came back, but we saw the last of it.
March 14th. Lucy is standing outside, and Linus comes up to her and says, "That's the first time in my life I've ever seen a whirly dog." Lucy, very confidently, closes her eyes and says, "Not whirly dog, whirly bird." In panel 3, Snoopy zooms by about 1.5 feet off the ground, using his ears as a top rotor like a helicopter. Linus now takes the composed and superior position and says, "I think if I had meant whirlybird, I would have said whirlybird."
Jumping the shark.
I knew Michael's brain hurts. Here's what I will say, and this is why Charles Schulz is a genius. If I said to you guys, all right, here's the assignment. You need to draw a dog, but the dog is actually a helicopter. Go. It would be next to impossible to think of how to do that. And you know exactly what that is.
Well, aerodynamically, it doesn't work.
Neither do bumblebees. It's okay.
Nah, this is like a bridge too far for me. Snoopy's imitations have been one of my favorite parts of the strip. So I guess Schulz ran out of animals.
I have a theory about maybe what's going on here. If you look at the first 3 months of the strips in 1960, and in particular, I see a lot of panels in these strips, or even jokes in these strips, that are based on a very experimental, iconic drawing of a character. And we know that Schulz in later years revealed that he did a lot of just sketching to get ideas. And I'm wondering, especially since he was around a group of artists who were all hanging out in his new converted, photography studio in Sebastopol, that maybe around them, or one of them, or maybe because they were all working together, he was drawing sketches to show them what he was thinking. And he was realizing he was coming up with some really fascinating ideas just by playing with the looks of the characters. And like Linus floating with Miss Othmar is an example of where I think he might have drawn that and then worked backwards to find out
how you get to a joke to show it in the strip. And you see that over and over again in these early strips. There's a lot of really fascinating visuals that to me suggest he's playing without thinking of what he's going to do, and then he backs into it after he comes up with an amazing drawing.
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
And this goes into my theory of Schultz is a character in the strip. He's actively playing with things to sort of, he's interacting with his characters. Like, I'll break the rules of gravity for you here. I'll, point out that it's just a comic strip over there. He's always in the strip in some way. And that's why the fantasy stuff doesn't bother me, because it's been established. The number one rule, if you want to talk about rules from things that have been established before, is that this is a comic strip. There's multiple times it's been pointed out that it's a comic strip. So in a comic strip, a dog can fly.
Now, would you say that that's unique to Schultz? Like, when you think of other comic strips, are the authors characters in the strip the way Schultz is?
Well, no, because what's interesting to me is I don't think Schultz even sees this. One of the Schultz quote that I use as the epigram for my memoir, The Dumbest Idea Ever, is cartoonists don't live anywhere. They aren't real people, which I think is one of the wildest things you could say. And I've thought about it for years. What does he mean by that? Cartoonists don't live anywhere. They aren't real people. But I think for him, he was saying that, to the general public, the comic strip is the cartoonist. They don't think about the cartoonist at all. And I think he would have thought it was an impossibility, actually, for you to put yourself in a strip. He didn't see it in other people's examples anyway, put it that way. But I feel that is exactly what he's doing, is that he is consciously interacting with these characters. Because he's doing this in a different way. He's not sitting there like Al Cap or whatever with a story meeting or, writing a script first. He, like Harold says, he's drawing these things. And sometimes these things are complete flights of fancy. Okay, so if you had asked me before this reread, and keep in mind, I've read the entire thing. If you'd asked me, when did Snoopy first become a helicopter? I would have said 1975. I would never have said 1960. I was shocked by that. So I have to move up the introduction of what I thought was the second Peanut strip. I think my nomination of March 14th, 1960 right here, this is where Snoopy starts. This is now an entirely different strip, because the basic premise of the Snoopy strip is that Snoopy is not really either interested in just being a dog in this comic strip, or is somehow, at the very least, trying to transcend being a dog in a comic strip. That was in the background sort of theme before. We saw that starting with the impressions, right? But now we're getting to the point that he is rebelling against the very laws that the other characters are subject to. And that's just going to continue. All right. Now we're going super meta. October 1st, 1952. This is Schroeder, who decides to quit the strip and get transferred to a new one. October 1st. Schroeder is playing the piano. He hums a note while he hits a note on the piano. He excitedly runs to Charlie Brown and says, "Hey, Charlie Brown, I've got perfect pitch." Charlie Brown, reading a book, doesn't even glance up and says, "You mean a perfect pitch. Besides, who cares? The baseball season is over." Schroeder walks away in disgust, saying, "Sometimes I think I should put in for a transfer to a new comic strip."
Ooh, meta. I think this is the first meta strip.
Yeah.
It is not something that happens often outside of the characters looking at the reader and speaking, but it does happen now and again. There are instances of the eyes being referred to as little dots of India ink later. So every once in a while, he goes so far as to say that this is a comic strip.
If he would have said, well, maybe I could transfer to another city, it would have been a bad joke. Wouldn't have been a good punchline, but you'd go, okay. Yeah, it's just the fact that characters realize they're in comic strips, which I've seen so many times. From very early on, it was really common to have comic strip characters be aware, or maybe pick up a comic and they see themselves in it, something like that. Yeah, just he could have gone in that direction, and that could have been just part of the strip where they're all aware they're in a comic strip. It could have worked. Yeah, I mean, like a big influence on my youth was early Fantastic Fours, and in number 10, Kirby and Lee are in there.
Yeah.
They become characters, and they're writing a Fantastic Four comic, and like Mr. Fantastic comes in and gives them some ideas.
But that's actually kind of better, right? Because it's not like they're saying the Fantastic Four comic in the world is the same, right? Isn't that like it's almost like a promotional item for the Fantastic Four in the comic, right?
Yeah, no, you can believe in a world like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what other strips did this, but I bet there's lots of them.
Yeah.
This one does kind of read like, this is something that my colleagues have done, and I am going to do it too. Yeah. And it's definitely, he hasn't done it before, which makes it weird for the strip, but it is almost like it feels like I'm part of the fraternity now. I'm going to do my gag.
Well, yeah, another comic strip, because have my professional comic, and Schroeder could get transferred to Dick Tracy, and that's like,
yeah,
we're peers.
And that's kind of cool.
Schroeder and Dick Tracy. That actually would be amazing.
Wow, Jimmy, how many have we racked up in the last few years that could be really fun books, graphic novels, TV shows?
That would be amazing. You pick it up right at the end of this strip, and someone goes, "Okay, Schroeder, come on," and he's pursuing Flat Top.
We should do an entire episode where we just find all the times we say this should be a
yes,
and collect all of those and see what we've got. If someone just wants to troll through them. Me. Yeah, right.
Well, something though that is not a great idea that we think needs to see its own thing is what we're wrapping up with here, and that's November 30th, 1954. Good old Charlotte Braun. November 30th. Charlie Brown is walking down the sidewalk. He spies a little girl he hasn't seen before. Charlie Brown says, "Ahem, you're new around here, aren't you?" He reaches out his hand in friendship and says, "My name is Charlie Brown. All my friends refer to me as good old Charlie Brown." The little girl, who has a very loud voice as indicated by her bold lettering style, says, "That's what my friends call me too." "Huh?" asks Charlie Brown. The little girl says, "Good old Charlotte Braun." Charlie Brown says, "Oh no."
This is the second big misstep of the year after the golf tournament.
Yeah.
Schultz doesn't introduce very many characters, and usually when they come in there, they might be sort of a one joke bit, and then they evolve. This was a character who supposedly her name was funny and who talked loud, and that seemed to be the entire thing. These were never reprinted, I don't think.
No, I don't think so.
So we're going off the Fantagraphics collection, which has everything. So I'd never seen these before. There's just nothing funny about this. And I think Schultz realized that. So she appears a few times next year in 55, and then she's gone forever into that magical place with Shermie and the other ones.
This was actually worse than I remember it. And here's why. In my mind, from the last time I read these strips, Charlotte Braun looked exactly like Charlie Brown, but like in drag. And that's actually kind of a funny idea. But when I looked back at it this time, it's like, no, she's just a little girl. I mean, she has a similar shaped head, but there's the facial features aren't the same and her body type isn't the same. So it really is just that she has a similar sounding name to Charlie Brown and she's loud.
Yeah, no, I think Harold should answer the philosophical question of where do Peanuts characters go when they disappear?
Well, I don't have the answer to that, but I do have, this was a courtesy of, I believe it was the Schultz Museum website and the Library of Congress, which has a letter from Charles Schultz to a complaining reader who apparently was somewhat, I'm just guessing, we don't have the original letter, at least I haven't seen it, that was written complaining about Charlotte Braun, how she should be basically dropped from the roster. And it gives a little bit of insight into Schultz, where he was willing to go with a reader. I'm assuming this was a playful, snarky letter, given his response. But this is what he wrote back to the person who did not want to see any more of Charlotte Braun. He said, "I am taking your suggestion regarding Charlotte Braun and will eventually discard her. If she appears any more, it will be in strips that were already completed before I got your letter, or because someone writes in saying that they like her. Remember, however, that you and your friends will have the death of an innocent child on your conscience. Are you prepared to accept such responsibility?" And then he does a little drawing of Charlotte Braun at the bottom with a gigantic axe in her head. Look it up.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh.
Great.
And she's just kind of standing there impassive.
Can you imagine getting that back?
Well, it's in the Library of Congress, so somebody thought much of that letter probably was on her conscience the rest of her life. There was never another Charlotte Braun.
Well, it's really funny. And look, it's so great to hear from readers, but every once in a while, you have to answer back with a little bit of snark. Is there anything that can be said about Charlotte Braun that we haven't already said?
Well, I mean, it's a really interesting insight into him and a reminder of, what he will and won't put into a strip,
Well, guys, that's it. That was our weird strip journey. It was really fun. I enjoyed looking at these strips again. It's crazy that they still provide entertainment and enjoyment after seeing them so many times. But yeah, a lot of fun. Do you guys have anything else to say to wrap up a weird week?
I wish this episode never happened.
Oh, man. Well, it happened, baby. So we'll be back in 2 weeks where we're going to be starting our new season. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we're going to announce. Remember, we said it was going to be a choice. It was either going to be Marcy, it was going to be Woodstock, or it was going to be Mean Girls. And we're not doing any of those. We're going to do sidekicks.
Well, we're going to do several of them all wrapped up in one.
There you go. So you don't want to miss that. And the way you're not going to miss that is by going over to our website. Sign up for that great Peanuts reread. That will get you that one email a month that lets you know what we're talking about from show to show. And remember, you can also write to us. We are unpackingpeanuts@gmail.com. You can also go ahead and call our hotline, which is 717-219-4162. And if you want to follow us on social media, we're at Unpack Peanuts on Instagram and Threads, and at Unpacking Peanuts on Facebook, Blue Sky, and YouTube. So, Harold, where are you going to be coming up?
I will be at the Tidewater Comic-Con in Virginia Beach on Saturday and Sunday, May 16th and 17th. So if you are in the area, please stop by. I'd love to say hi.
And I will be doing Free Comic Book Day at Beyond Comics in Gaithersburg, Maryland. I'll be there all day, signing books. The new Amelia anniversary editions will be there.
What date?
Pre-order them. Whatever day Free Comic Book Day is, May 2nd, I think. So if you're available, come see us at those places. That's it for this week. So for Michael, Harold, and Liz, this is Jimmy saying, be of good cheer.
Yes.
Yes.
Be of good cheese.
Be of good cheer.
Be of good cheese.
Unpacking Peanuts is copyright Jimmy Gownley, Michael Cohen, Harold Buckholtz, and Liz Sumner. Produced and edited by Liz Sumner. Music by Michael Cohen. Additional voiceover by Aziza Shakrala Clark. For more from the show, follow Unpack Peanuts on Instagram and Threads. Unpacking Peanuts on Facebook, Blue Sky, and YouTube. For more about Jimmy, Michael, and Harold, visit unpackingpeanuts.com. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.
Isn't this weird? Isn't this weird?
Well, of course
Is this
it's
weird?
weird.
To me, this is weird.